Alright, so we continue. We are saying when baking, flour is mixed with water, salt, and sugar, and yeast to form a paste that we call a dough. When there is insufficient oxygen, zymes from yeast acts on sugars to form carbon dioxide and an alcohol. But if oxygen is sufficient, yeast carries out aerobic respiration. The carbon dioxide begins to form bubbles in the dough, causing it to rise. The dough is then often placed in a warm place to provide an optimum temperature for enzyme activity. And if you remember the lesson on enzymes, we said enzyme works best at an optimum temperature and pH. And then after this, the dough can then be baked. So going on into detail on lactic fermentation, we are saying in lactic fermentation, this is the release of energy from food substances in living cells in the absence of oxygen, producing lactic acid as the only byproduct. The amount of energy released is very little. It is about 150 kilojoules from 1 mole of glucose. Remember, the one on top was alcoholic fermentation, where we produce 210 kilojoules of energy from 1 mole of glucose. But in lactic acid fermentation, or lactic fermentation where we produce lactic acid, we are saying the equivalence of energy here is 150 kilojoules of energy from 1 mole of glucose. So then here is our word equation. We are saying glucose is going to decompose to produce lactic acid and energy. Then our chemical equation is C6H12O6, which is glucose, which is producing C3H6O3. So the simplest way of knowing the product produced here is just divide these numbers for glucose by 2. So when you divide 2 into 6, you have a 3, meaning C will have a 3. When you divide 2 into H, you have 6. When you divide 2 into 6, you are going to have 3. So that is going to be your lactic acid. Now, in examination questions, when they are asking you to distinguish, make sure even as you are sharing facts like about which one releases what amount of energy, make sure you also include the word as well as the chemical equations. Now, this process of lactic fermentation takes place in the muscles of the animals during exercise. So this is because the extra energy required by the animal exercise cannot all be generated by aerobic respiration. Since there is a limited supply of oxygen, the energy is therefore generated by lactic fermentation. However, the lactic acid that is formed has some harmful effects to the body, such as it is going to cause the person to have some fatigue. Apart from having fatigue, the person can also experience having muscle cramps, and worse still, the person can even faint. That is when there is a high supply of lactic acid in our muscles. Then, blood flowing through the muscles carries some lactic acid with it to the brain, and the brain detects its presence. It then sends impulses to the rib cage to increase the breathing rate and depth, and to the heart to increase the heart rate. So this increase in oxygen supply to the muscles, all right, there is that increase in the oxygen supply to the muscles. So this oxygen is needed to break down lactic acid to water and carbon dioxide. The total amount of oxygen needed to break down the lactic acid producing the lactic acid produced during exercise is called oxygen debt. So this is a very important fact. I'll repeat it again. We are saying the total amount of oxygen needed to break down the lactic acid produced during exercise is called oxygen debt. Let's now move on to ATP and its significance. So we are having ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate, and a pi. From this, we are going to have one molecule of ATP, which is being produced, and then this is going to be the one that is going to help to release energy. So why is ATP important? It makes it possible for energy to be stored and transported. Remember, we said the energy currency for the body is ATP, right? So it also makes energy available when and where it is needed. We know to say for us to be able to speak, for us to be able to think, for us to be able to do different kinds of things, including movement, we need some energy. So that energy is going to come from ATP. So now let's go on to the importance of this respiration. So respiration is important. Remember, we said it is the release of energy from food substances inside the living cells, right? So the energy that is released during the respiration process is used in the following processes. Number one, maintenance of a constant body temperature. So for homeostasis to happen, we need respiration to happen. Okay, we need that energy which we get from respiration to occur in order for us to maintain a constant body temperature. Apart from maintaining a constant body temperature, reproduction also is important. This respiration is important because it makes reproduction to be possible. Apart from reproduction, it also helps to make sure that cell division occurs efficiently. Apart from that, we also have active transport and growth, or the synthesis of macromolecules. So the memory aid that can be used is Mr. CAG. All right, so that is the maintenance of a constant body temperature. You can simply say homeostasis. And then we have reproduction, we have cell division, we have active transport, we have growth, or the synthesis of macromolecules. So this marks the end of our lesson for today on respiration. Thank you so much for paying attention, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out so that we can move at the same pace. May the good Lord bless you, and bye-bye.